going on, and it's really powerful stuff that can make a difference in a lot of people's lives. So, so thanks for hanging in there. You guys are doing great.
You are.
Hi, Dr.
Good evening.
Hello, how are you, sir?
I'm excited to be here having my diet gold leaf tea, my very favorite. Just got home to Lake Norman. Traffic was a little bit heavy, but I made it. I only come home about once a week. Been kind of busy at work these days. I don't know. It kind of goes in cycles, all that administrative stuff. But I'd rather handle it up front than wait till December. So, but we're doing well. Hope everybody else is. So what are we going to talk about this week? Got anything exciting to talk about? Anything happening in anybody's life? All right. Well, I guess you saw the email from Dr. Bull that we got our full CAPE accreditation for the full 7 years. So we're very proud of that. There's a good many AFIs on the undergraduate side, but I think we're pretty clean on the graduate side. I think we were exemplary, so I'm very pleased about that. That's a lot of work. But you know, we had systems of data collection already in place, and I had in TaskStream and had built the reports already. So ours is just ongoing. The only other thing is I'm doing that case study. So we'll need to. I need to send that thing out from Qualtrics rather than the hard copy. But we're doing a longitudinal case study. When students are near the end, we have them do a final reflection, not about so much the program, but what they got, and reflect back on themselves. Then we're going to revisit that starting 5 years. We're in the third year of data to see if what they got was really what they needed. And so I'm interested in that. But you know, part of the feedback that we get all the time is they learn more from case studies than anything else. I think that's to tell me to quit droning on and talking every week, but who knows? But I am very pleased that that we got our CAPE accreditation for 7 years. It was a lot of work on the advanced side, but they'll still have a good bit of work to do on the undergraduate side. But I'm sure they'll skip right to that. So that's really good. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. As I don't say this very often, but I hope to finish pretty early tonight, not spend a whole lot of time, but you know how that goes. I'm sure that'll, once I get started, it'll be different. I was answering all these emails is the reason I came on right on time. So as we always do every week, let's look and see where we are on our weekly schedule. This is week 12. We've got managing facilities tonight. And so this week's activities were to conduct a facilities walkthrough using the assessment inventory checklist. How well does your school do? And interviewing an administrator concerning fundraising. Now, let me remind you of the takeaways on both of these activities. That facilities inventory, if you don't use the one I've got and that your district's got one that they use, that's wonderful. But for some reason, everybody remembers or knows that you have to do a monthly fire drill in public schools. The law says you do a monthly fire drill, and twice monthly you do a facility safety inspection twice a month. Now, if something happens in your building, and I know this myself because when I was principal at Oak Hill in Morganton, I had an elementary and a junior high on the same campus. And up in the junior high, let's see, Dan, I'm trying to remember what Dan's name was. He was principal up there. And we shared the cafeteria and gym. But before they closed that facility and tore it down and opened the new middle school, a student got into a janitor's closet. that was unlocked, got to some chemicals and rags, and set the building on fire. That did not go well. That did not end well. The door should have been locked. The chemicals shouldn't have been in there. All those kinds of things. They hadn't been doing any safety inspections to catch it. Needless to say, that did not go well. And so, people want to know when public funds are involved, and you're supposed to be a good custodian or steward of those funds and those facilities. It's actually written into the law that you'll take care of the facilities and keep them in good order. But it also says that you'll check twice a month for safety issues. That was not done. And so that one didn't end up well. So most districts now have some sort of a safety checklist like this. If they don't, you're more than welcome to use this one. I developed this one in Charlotte. Let me remind you again, and I apologize for not already having this loaded, but you can't preload some of this stuff. NCGS 288. And so here we go. Okay. To conduct fire drills and inspect for fire hazards. It's the duty of the principal to conduct a fire drill during the first week after the opening of school, and thereafter at least one fire drill each school month in each building is charged with children assembled. They include all pupils and school employees in use of various ways of egress to simulate evacuation of said buildings under various conditions. All those things. It shall be the duty of the principal to inspect each of the buildings charged at least twice each month during the regular school session. Cafeterias, gyms, boiler rooms, storage room, auditorium, stage areas, as well as classrooms. Everything. That includes parking lots, any areas, ball fields, stadiums, everything you got to inspect it twice a month to make sure that it's safe from fire hazards and other hazards that could occur in your building. And you have to file written copies each month of these things. Now, I'm not going to tell you that these things are going to get checked very often, and maybe even never until you have an incident. And then you better have your documentation or you are fried. That's just the way it works. And nobody's going to come out every month and say, did you do your fire drill? Did you do your 2 safety inspections? Hopefully you'll have a superintendent or an area superintendent who will remind you at evaluation times, make sure you keep up with those kinds of things. But if they don't, it doesn't matter. It's the law. It's your duty and responsibility. So if you let something if something happens, and some things are unavoidable, but if something happens and you don't have any paperwork, even if nobody got hurt, even if an egress wasn't blocked, if there was a fire in your building and you don't have your documentation, it's not going to go well for you. I remember at an elementary school in the northern part of the county, I read in the paper that there had been a fire over at the local elementary school. And I was like, well, I didn't see anything about that in any of the reports that came across my desk. It's not in, those kinds of things kind of catch your attention. And I went up there and I met the fire marshal there, and he said, yeah, it was arson. And I asked the principal, why didn't you? Well, I wasn't sure. I said, he told you it was arson when he came and investigated it the first time. Why didn't you report it? Well, come to find out, she didn't report it, not only because it was arson and because, people would be alarmed that there was a fire, but she hadn't been doing her safety inspections. And so she didn't have any paperwork. And basically they said, this door was left unlocked. Kids went in here and started the fire out in a maintenance shed in the back of the building there near the cafeteria. And she knew that she didn't have any paperwork, so her response was to try to hide it. That didn't go well either. That's one of those things. I mean, I told you.
How long do you need to keep those on file? How many years?
As long as you're principal there.
Gotcha.
I mean, there's no statute of limitations on those things. I'd keep them forever. Um, when I was principal at Eastway, when it was still junior high school, we wouldn't let kids drive cars, even though some were old enough. Well, most were old enough at Eastway um, to drive cars. We had 1,100 students, 700 of them were in the ninth grade, and most of them were over age of 16. But that's back in the days when you had to, in the ninth grade, you had to pass English plus 4 more to get to go on to the high school. It's when we still had some senior highs in Charlotte. Garinger was a senior high back then, 10, 12. We fed them, and so we had a lot of older kids. And they would steal cars or drive cars. Some of them had driver's license. And we would try to keep them off of campus, but they would come on campus in their cars. I don't know what happened, but over the holidays, there were some kids on campus in cars. They were actually ours. And a fire got started and it burned one of our buildings. I don't know. I don't think they just pulled it up to do it, but you know, that's one of those things. And you better believe they came and asked for all the reports. You had to do that because the building got burned. So I don't want to belabor the point, but you better spend some time. So I wanted to look at that thing as well. There's a lot of things on there that you might not think of. I hope all of you have already done this activity, but if you haven't, these are the things that you have to do to be safe. I had one turned in recently that said that they were concerned that parents would get in the bus line and let their kids out in the buses in order to avoid the big line in the front of the school. That is a problem now. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a status thing or what it is, but parents will not let children ride the bus anymore. Every parent must bring their child to school. And so, you know, I don't understand that, but, you know, every parent must pick their child up from school. They start lining up out in parking lots right after lunch, and some of them sit there for an hour or two waiting on their kids now. Well, that presents a really bad problem, especially trying to get people through the front that people come in business that got into the front of the school, and those people lined up in the driveway. But the bigger issue is when you have cars and buses together and kids darting out in traffic and parents. I was at school down in Garner. They kind of did a serpentine among the school was at the top of the hill and their parking lots were down the hill, and the driveway serpentine through the parking lots. And so the parents, instead of coming around all the way around the loop and letting them out the front, would cut through the parking lots and let their kids, and the kids had to walk through 3 different parking lots with cars going back and forth to get to the front of the school. And of course, thankfully, well, I shouldn't say that, that's not the right way, but our intern had already finished there. Tim had already finished when the kid got hit, because you knew a kid was going to get hit. I mean, it's not if, it's when. You knew that was going to happen. And that was one of the things that he noted when he did this same activity is and I came down and actually watched, because I was his internship supervisor. That's back when we still were doing classes there at Athens Drive in Raleigh. And so he was my intern, and so I visited him every semester. I stood and watched it, and I was like, this is crazy. This is like Russian roulette. Eventually, you know, the bullet's going to be in the chamber. Eventually, one of these kids is going to get hit. This is just, you know, this is like running the gauntlet. And sure enough, and so that didn't go well there either. That's called, in the law, we've talked about this, that's foreseeability. A rational person would realize kids running through 3 different parking lots with cars going back and forth this way, that a kid's eventually going to get hit. Cars backing in and out, turning around, people going the wrong way through the parking lot, you know, trying to shortcut, going all the way around the loop and waiting their turn. It's really bad, really bad. Buses. Mute myself. Y'all hear me now? Hello, am I back? All right, thank you. I don't know what this will do to our recording, but we're still recording. All right, so back to, let me share again. Hopefully we won't lose the signal again. Um, um, but parking, cars, buses, kids in traffic, that's a biggie. Um, that's something that would be my top priority. If I were at a building, that would be my top priority, is making sure cars and buses, and that parents couldn't let kids out in the traffic. That would be number one for me. Surveillance cameras, signs, those are very happy. Access control. I told you earlier this semester, I went down to Chatham County and saw one of their new maximum security schools. Problem is the building was tight as a drum. You had to go in, you had to be buzzed into a vestibule and then buzzed into the school. It was wonderful, except I could drive within 10 feet of the playground with no fence. And all the kids were outside the day I got there. It was a nice spring day. Every kid in the building was out of the building and out at the playground, and I could just drive right up. Must be a storm up somewhere. I'm losing my signal tonight. Usually when I'm home, I don't have this problem. I've got a hard line here. All right. Am I back on? Everybody here? All right. I guess that means for me to be quick like I said I would be tonight. All right. So make sure you work through this. It talks about chemicals, buildings. Another biggie is teachers leaving their rooms unlocked when they're not in there. Make sure, I mean, that's something that ought to be when teachers leave a room, because perpetrators and kids can slip into an unlocked room. That's really a dangerous thing. You can think of that. Boiler rooms, all the rooms with chemicals, all that stuff. Make sure you have your red and green cards or just your green cards. Some districts have gone to either red or green and not green and red. Fire hazards, graffiti, all these things. So make sure that you do an assessment of your school. The other is fundraising. We've talked about fundraising. The state even talks about fundraising. Let's see. They want to do things that are for community spirit, to improve instruction and community spirit. And so the state even talks about they'd like to see fundraisers that are community based. And obviously a lot of school districts have done away with door-to-door sales, putting kids in harm's way. And the state has even addressed that in what they would prefer to see. We've talked before about fundraising. You can delegate the activity, but not the responsibility, the financial accounting responsibility piece. Money still has to be turned in every day. Don't use teachers to take away from class time. All those kinds of things. If the PTA or PTO does the work, or the band boosters or the choral boosters or whoever does the work, you still are responsible to make sure that the money is accounted for, and whatever they sell, the people get their whatever that product is. That was always the problem when I was a high school principal. We'd have groups selling things all over, and I'd get 1,000 complaints with I didn't get it, or it wasn't what I thought it was, or this didn't have any value. I gave $10 for this and it wasn't worth anything. I thought, well, you didn't really understand the whole purpose of fundraising. But you know, you're going to deal with those things. You better know up front what they're doing. Fruit sales, those things were always a disaster. You'd always have a year where you had a hot, it'd be hot in December when the fruit arrived and it would spoil. Just, you know, the fruit was a disaster always. That Indian River deal, that was a disaster. North Mech is going to stop their barbecue after 50 years. There's no money in it. If you can't use school employees, there's no money hiring it done. Those kinds of things. But that's the kind of things that folks want you to do, is those community spirit kind of things. except the problem is there's no money in them. You make your money on candy, but they don't want you selling candy. So my point is fundraising a lot of times is more trouble than it's worth. The things that you can do to make money, they don't want you to do. Things that they want you to do, you can't make any money. It's just a lot of time and a lot of drain on your faculty. And so a lot of those things are out now. So fundraising, it's a problem, but regardless, remember the takeaway is you have to do the financial accounting on it, whether you as a school did it or whether you have a parent group do it. You still are responsible for the financial accounting. So please remember that. All right. I have several PowerPoints and documents tonight, and I certainly am not going to go through all of these. I want to just, as I said, I want to introduce them. I've got a really good PowerPoint here, except it's way too long, that talks about equalizing funding. And I want to hit on that one again. We've already done the Leandro case to set this up. It seems like a really good idea to manipulate the money, except Leandro says you can't. You can't manipulate the state money. You know you can't manipulate federal money. It comes for a specific purpose. And you can't manipulate state money. It has to go to the student it's intended to. And so that means you can only manipulate local money. The problem with that, of course, is equity, but it's people leaving. If I'm a parent over here at this school and I hear that you're going to take money from my school and give it to another school because those kids need it more than my kid, regardless of what level my kid is, I don't think that's equity. And so this is a really good PowerPoint that works through all of these questions about equity and funding and those things. And so integration caused white flight the first time. It's happening again when we start shifting the money around. This is kind of the second wave of white flight or affluent flight from our schools. It's not always just race-based, it's more affluent. But when you start taking money from one school and giving it to the other, parents who have choices will exercise those. Initially, back in the early days, it was parents fleeing to private schools who could afford them. Now it's parents fleeing to private charter. You got charters now. You've got some parochial. You've got some Christian schools. Parents have choices now. And if they feel like that you are taking from their child to give to somebody else's, they will leave. And so equity also, you can't talk about equity without talking about the client system leaving you, about market share. Equity and market share are the yin and the yang. The more you do for equity to give to one school, the more you lose market share at another. And so it's a balancing act. You know, I can't tell you. And so, and see, I use this as an example of what happens when there's white flight or affluent flight from schools. Support and funding leaves, and guess what happens? Salaries drops, building retain materials not replenished. We're seeing that now. As your market share declines, the amount of money in your school declines, conditions, quality decline. And so what I'm saying to you, and I'll kind of wrap this one up, is it's not as simple as these kids over here need help, let's run over there and give them money. That might be the morally right thing to do, but from a business perspective, understand you're going to lose market share if you do that. And so you have to find a balance and a creative way to try to help kids that need help. I'm not advocating that we don't help at-risk children, but I'm telling you that it's not going to be a popular thing. I told somebody the other day, I thought we were better people than we've actually turned out to be lately. I've been really disappointed in us as a society that we're not looking after the least of us as much as the Lord said we ought to. But that's the way it works. It's about market share now. And so this is a really good PowerPoint. I recommend that you spend some time with it. I won't bore you by reading it tonight. I've got some things about how to plan facilities. You don't really need these until you get into, this is more for if you're in a small district, and I've been in big and little. I've been in 4, too big, too little. This would have not been of any value to me in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. We had people who did this. However, when I was in Burke County, I had to do this. I had to be the clerk of the works when we built a new building. This is one of those things that goes in your toolbox. If you ever become principal in a district, a small district, you'll expect it to be a construction foreman as well as a principal. And this is a really good, I found this one somewhere. That's not mine, but I can't claim somebody else's work, but I found this one. This is a good one when you're going into, when you're starting the preliminary work or plans, and you'll generally be involved in this. These are some things to consider in terms of what kind of space you're going to design, those kinds of things, and what the process is. Most of you will never have need to use this. Some of you will. Some of you will be in the smaller districts. You will be the clerk of the works. They will not hire an outside construction management firm. They'll expect you to do that. They'll have a contractor, but they'll expect you to go over the punch list, and you'll be involved in the planning and the specs and all those things. If so, this is a good one to have for facilities. The same way, these are some things you'll need to understand. What kind of plans that you need to make when you're planning for facilities. There's basically 3 types of plans: the operational, emergency, and the maintenance plans that will have to be developed before the building is built. Again, if you have to be the clerk of the works, you need to know this stuff. And you'll probably have to be a part of writing the manuals or setting up the routines for maintenance, emergency, the evacuation. You'll be involved in this as well. And so this is a good one to keep in your toolbox as well if you're in a small district and ever find yourself having to do these things. We've already talked about that one. And so that brings me to kind of my last one here that I wanted to cover tonight. On facilities, there's a lot of factors and types of what kind of facilities you're going to build. If you're going to have impact on these, you may move beyond the principal ranks into the superintendency. This is mostly what this is going to be about. And there's a lot of big ticket questions on this one. It's not a big one. And so this is kind of what the future looks like. Education will continue to be viewed as key to economic growth. There'll be a growing mismatch between the literacy of the labor force and competency required in the jobs. People don't have the job skills that they need because of technology. There will continue to be a wide spectrum of school finance initiatives and experiments will be undertaken. You understand that charter schools and vouchers are a financial initiative. They're both to save money. Let me say that again. You understand that charter schools and voucher system are financial initiatives. They're not educational initiatives. They're a way to try to find ways to save money on the operation of school and the facilities for school. Because remember, the only thing that the school district has to supply to a charter school is classrooms. So they can give them old mobiles. So they have much less money involved in facilities in a charter school. And so vouchers and charters are attempts, that is a financial initiative in order to try to save money in states where, where they're scrapped because of the economic outlook of their state. They're looking for alternative ways to finance education, and charters and vouchers fall within that. Regional disparities in educational resources will increase. You know what's happening right now. There's a great migration happening again in our country. People are leaving the rural areas and coming to the suburban and urban areas, leaving more rural areas and school districts behind because there's nobody there to pay property taxes. The value of the property has gone down. Local money from schools comes from property taxes and business taxes. And even if a business moves into a low wealth area like Facebook moved into Rutherford County and built a server farm, they brought 15 jobs, but they got tax free for life, and the county gave them $6 million to come, plus their state initiatives. Now the county's on the verge of bankruptcy. They didn't understand that $6 million wasn't a good trade for 15 minimum wage jobs. But that's what companies like Facebook and some of the big companies do. They go out into rural areas and they take advantage of those places who are desperate to try to bring in some revenue, not understanding they're not going to bring in any revenue. They're not going to pay taxes. That's what funds your schools. So every time, and every time you see these state initiatives in North and South Carolina in terms of incentives to get companies to come to their state, that money almost dollar for dollar comes out of the education budget, unfortunately. So these disparities in the funding for facilities are going to get worse and worse. Public school enrollments, including, but now again, we're counting charters in that as well. Only 15% of jobs will require diplomas. More than half will require post-secondary and training. But, being able to fund that is the issue. Equity issues become the major policy. Educational equity will be redefined not in terms of access, but as I told you, in terms of expenditures. We see that as equity now. And so if my kids have all they need over here, but somebody's kids over here are getting more money, I'm not happy. We don't define equity as access anymore. We define it as expenditure now. That's the argument. And again, that leads to loss of market share, people fleeing and going into other areas. Leaders must consider and determine the educational structure, includes analyzing the future in relation to these data. Demographics, what's happening in your county, interest rates, tax limitation measures, risk management, benefits, personnel needs, all these things factor in. And then that brings back the big picture, who should be educated at public expenses, every child. How long can you stay? Now you can stay till you're 21. Will we cut that back if revenues diminish? They already have. So really what's happening is we're charter schools and other types of schools are being, because they are revenue models, they're not educational, they're about saving money. We're still in that we'll serve everybody, but it might not be in the traditional public school. There's going to come a time, I'm afraid, when we're going to start entering into a discussion, is it really worthwhile to try to educate everybody? It's costing too much, we can't afford it. Or we choose not to afford it. We're giving all these business corporate welfare and incentives, and for whatever reason we believe that that's the way to go rather than quality education. And so at some point we're going to have to make some decisions. Will states provide adequate funds to sustain their current programs at all, or desirable optimum levels. No, we're already talking about basic education again. I think that ship has sailed. We're now only talking about the state having to provide a basic education, not optimal, not desirable, just basic. That's all we're going to fund is a basic education. Should the states continue to increase their share of revenue mix, even if it results in the loss of local control? I don't see states. I think states are going to decrease, and it's not about control. It's just about the money. Is inadequate funding a matter of lack of ability to pay, the problems of taxpayers' lack of willingness to pay, or the demographics of it's all three? The poorer states don't have the tax base. People are becoming less and less willing to pay for education. We don't see it as the great salvation in our society anymore. It's now not in my backyard, or if it doesn't affect me. And so states don't have the ability to pay because they're putting money in to financial incentives to bring jobs. Whether it brings them or not is debatable, but a lot of states, especially in the South, have made the decision that they would rather put money into financial or economic incentives to get businesses to come rather than public education. They've already made that. North Carolina's already made that decision. That ship has sailed. And then we have unwillingness to pay in some of the more wealthy districts, and then we have an inability in the poorer districts. So the outlook is not good. Now, I didn't say that to get you all to jump off the ship and get out of school administration. The point in telling you this is you're going to have to do you're going to have to do more with less. The answer to the question, and Dr. Laws and I had a class with the EDCI group last night. The answer is not we need more to whatever the question is. You're going to be caught between what is law and what is policy. What am I required to do, and what I have, the resources that I have. And the answer can't just be, I need more money, I need more people, I need more stuff. You've got to organize for success in your instructional program. You've got to organize for success in your master schedule. Again, we go back to our triangle. You organize for success by making sure that your master schedule and your budget support your school improvement plan. And if you can do that, you can overcome a lot of these financial issues. The whole point of tonight's discussion or this rant is you're not going to get more money, so you got to figure out something besides that if you want to improve schools and be successful in schools. And we've given you that way to do that. Now, the first half tonight was about safety. Make sure your place is safe, whether it's new or old or whatever. Make sure it's safe. But the second half is funding's not going to get better. There's not going to be a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You're going to have to do more with less. But if you organize and you know how to run schools and you're willing to do that, you can still get the results that you need. And the solution to your problems is not going to be, I just need more money and need more people. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to be more efficient with what you've got. I apologize for losing my signal a couple times tonight. I don't know what's happened. Normally, that doesn't happen here. I'm going to open the floor up for discussion from anybody that would like to add anything in tonight before we go. As I told you, I wanted to be done in about 45 minutes. We're about 42 minutes in, so we're doing well. Anything anybody have they'd like to contribute tonight, talking about funding or facilities? All right, you get a 15-minute break this week. That won't happen often. Now, next week we have our week off, don't we, for Thanksgiving? Is that coming up? That's week after next. So next week's our case study, isn't it? Let me go back and look at my weekly schedule here. Okay. Yep. So next week we have our case study, and then we have our Thanksgiving break. That's what I thought. All right. So make sure you get your case study. Make sure you get that and have that ready for us next week, and we'll pick a group that hadn't gone before to present their case study. Dr. Barnes, Dr. Sumner, anything that you have for the good of the group before we go? All right. I'll see you all next week for our last case study. Thank you.